Hi guys. All right, so here is our last video, the last section of chapter 21, last chapter of the year, so yay for that. And we're going to talk about acid and base strength, what pH means, and just kind of wrap everything up. Okay, so acid strength is a characteristic of acids that is determined by the number of hydrogen or hydronium ions that are formed in a water solution. So if you put this acid into water, how many hydroniums will form? So how it'll split up, it'll combine with the water and form hydronium. And this depends on the degree of ionization. So this word ionization is a word that we have mentioned before. Remember, ionization means that it breaks apart into its ions. And if you are talking about strength of an acid, a strong acid ionizes to a large extent, and actually it ionizes 100%, which means that when you put something like HCl into water, there's an acid, it will break into H and Cl 100%. So if I put 10 HCl molecules into water, I would get 10 H's and 10 Cl's. They would separate completely. That is strong. Weak acids, on the other hand, ionize only slightly. So if I put 10 like H3PO4s, that's not working very well, then when it breaks up, it would break up into some H's, it would break up into some PO4s, but then the rest of them would stay together. Sorry, I know it's super messy. And you wouldn't have total ionization. And so that's the difference between strong and weak. It's not about how much, it's not about the concentration, it's about the ionization. Another thing that it doesn't depend on is the number of hydrogen atoms that are in the acid. So for example, H2SO4, sulfuric acid, is not stronger than HCl because it has more H's. That is not the rule. And so just kind of keep that in mind. We tend to look at things like this H3PO4 that I have up here on the screen. H3PO4 is actually one of the weaker acids out there. And so the number of hydrogens does not determine the strength of the acid. It really is just about how strongly an acid holds its hydrogens. Okay, so base strength is just like the acids. And so instead of depending on the H's, it depends on the OH's. So how many hydroxide ions are produced in a water solution is the way to determine a base strength. And so it's just like acids, but just the other component. Bases are a little bit easier to determine strength, or to tell strong from weak bases, because bases that have alkali or alkali earth metals, so column 1, so column 1 on the periodic table or column 2, they are named alkali and alkaline earth metals because of the bases that they form. Alkali is another word for base. And so if it is anything from those two columns with an OH, you have a strong base. So those are pretty easy to figure out. And then, like I was saying before, concentrated or dilute solutions don't have an effect on the strength or the weakness of an acid base. So it's like, like if you are drinking like a cup of coffee and you're like, wow, this is really strong coffee. You're saying strong in terms of being concentrated. That is not the way that we would talk about acids and bases. Okay, so now there's a page in your book that lists some of the strong or weak. Just FYI, if you wanna know that, look on that page. Okay, so now the pH scale. Most of you have probably at least heard of pH. pH stands for the power of hydrogen. So it is a mathematical condition or mathematical base for determining the number of hydronium and hydroxide ions that are in the solution. And it is a scale that ranges from 1 to 14. 7's right in the middle, and it is a neutral at that point. Basically what that means is that the hydronium and the hydroxide are equal there. But it is based on exponents and logarithms and math, basically. So we could get Mr. Jordan or Mrs. Hawkins on here and they could do all the math for you, because I can't. And so, but it's based on a log function. And so in a couple of years when you guys take chemistry, we will do the actual calculations with our calculator and figure some of this out. But for now, I want you to know it is a mathematical based number. And so, like I was saying before, the hydronium and hydroxide are always there. It kind of depends, though, on the ratio to determine what the pH actually is. And so if you're looking at acids, acids will have a higher number of hydronium, which is that H3O. And in that scenario, when you do the calculation and the log for that, you would get a number between 1 and 6.9, and that would be telling you that it is an acid. The number itself doesn't really mean anything. It's just telling you that it's on the acid side of the pH scale. Bases are going to have a higher number of hydroxide, the OH, and when you do the calculations for this, you're going to find a number between 7.1 and 14. So remember, 7 right there in the middle would be, that's a 7, even though it doesn't look like it. 7.0 is neutral. Okay, so just kind of know that scale. It's fairly useful, and we would have done a lab where we would have calculated some of the, or used some papers, which I'll talk about in a minute, to figure out pH and that kind of thing. But it is just kind of an easy way to determine acid or base. Okay, last but not least, if you're measuring the pH of a solution, sometimes it's not necessarily just, you know, an actual number, but it is trying to kind of figure out if you have an acid or a base. We've talked about some of these before. You could use litmus paper, and litmus paper is a natural, or has a natural component that comes from lichens. Lichens are a little symbiotic organism made of algae and fungus that change color depending on if they are in the presence of an acid or a base. Acids cause litmus paper to turn red. Remember, kind of red in quotes because it's kind of more of a pink. And then they turn bases turn litmus paper blue. You could also use phenolphthalein. It is an organic compound. It's a carbon-based substance that has no reaction with acid, so it would stay clear, but in a base turns a very vivid pink. And then there are lots of other natural indicators. Many different plants, fruits, and vegetables contain substances called anthocyanins, and these are usually in like the peel of a fruit or in the flower of a fruit, and they will change colors as you change pH. So for example, if purple cabbage, if you've ever, for any reason, boiled purple cabbage, the juice that is produced from boiling cabbage leaves, purple cabbage leaves, is a kind of a purplish color. But when you put it into an acid, it turns green. The liquid will turn green. And when you put it into a base, it will turn more of a bluish color. Apple peels will change from yellows to oranges. There are even some fruits, not fruits, but flowers that will be different colors depending on the soil that they're in. And so plants can be a very good indicator. All right, now some other not natural substances. We have universal indicators, and these not only change from, like red to blue, they have all different ranges of colors that are different at different pH levels. And so that you would have like a kind of like a little color scale to look at, and you could determine the actual pH. And then they have pH meters, where there is a voltage that is produced by the hydronium, by that H positive component, and it is read as electricity essentially, or the amount of electricity that can flow through a substance. And so it gives an actual reading, like it gives a number reading. So these pH meters are considered obviously the most precise because they give you an actual number and are used very often to determine pH, particularly when you need it to be very balanced or you need to know precisely, like in medications or in like stuff you're going to use on your body, soaps, those kinds of things. So pH is important to know, and it's our last little part of acids and bases. So let me know if you have questions, and I will talk to you later. Bye, guys.